Let's take you first to Melbourne, where Jewish leaders are responding to this suspicious synagogue fire. Let's listen in.
On a Friday, as Naomi said, just before Shabbat, the Jewish holy day, there's every indication that it is an anti-Semitic attack.
What sort of sense of fear is there in the Jewish community?
So there were unfortunately injuries this morning. You need to understand that this is a very active and busy synagogue. It's a place of prayer and it's a place of study. And there were people here at 4:15 in the morning when the attack occurred who were engaging in quiet, prayerful study, as is their right and the right of every Australian. They have been, as we understand it, they've had minor injuries. We wish them all the best. We wish them a speedy recovery. In terms of the Jewish community has been in fear for the last 14 months. This, for us, is just evidence of that fear. This is something that is the greatest manifestation of what we have been seeing and hearing in terms of threatening emails, threatening social media, threatening letters, and all sorts of other material, attacks, graffiti and so forth over the last 14 months. I would say this to the Australian Jewish community and particularly to the Melbourne Jewish community: don't hide away. A message to our community is be Jewish, be proudly Jewish. The police will have an increased presence over this weekend at our synagogues here in Melbourne. We will be looked after by the police as best as they can, is the message that we have received. But we are in fear.
I'd just like to add that this morning I was contacted by a number of parents who were dropping their children at Jewish schools and noticed the increased security. Now, they'd been busy getting their kids ready for school, so they hadn't been able to tune into the news. But for them to have to discover that the security across our community has been increased because of this attack, and to need to explain that to their young children, is gutting for our community. It's incredibly traumatic what's been happening, not just for the people of this synagogue, but for the broader Jewish community.
Explain the significance of this particular synagogue to the Melbourne and Australian Jewish community?
So our community is very diverse in terms of religious practice, and we have a whole lot of different synagogues that cater to people who practice their Judaism in different ways. This synagogue, though, is incredibly significant. It belongs to our ultra-orthodox community, and they are the keepers of our religious scholarship, our religious tradition and our faith. They are among the most devout of our community, and this synagogue would be one of the busiest in our communities. There are people coming and going all day and all evening. This is the centre of the Addas community life. So it is particularly jarring that it has happened here.
In terms of tonight around, it sounds as though it's sort of almost politically agnostic, is that correct?
Faith is ultimately about faith. It's not about politics. The people here, they want to keep the laws of the Torah. They want to raise their family in the Jewish faith. You know, they vote like every other Australian, but their faith is separate to how their politics are.
We've already seen the Victorian government do things like make this festival illegal to really pump up those laws against anti-Semitism. What more can authorities and governments do to support the Jewish community?
I note that the anti-vilification reforms were introduced to Parliament last week, the Victorian Parliament. But if you look closely at that legislation, there are significant delays in implementing some of those reforms. So even once it passes Parliament, some of those law changes won't come in for a number of years. Our ask of the Victorian government is to, as soon as possible, introduce new laws that can hold people who perpetrate religious and racial vilification to account.
We talked to a couple of witnesses earlier this morning. They said some sacred scrolls and texts were in the synagogue. Can you maybe touch on what it means to have those sacred texts and they might have been damaged?
So there are an incredible number of Torah scrolls, we call them in here, which is where the Bible is written. Now, Those are not books, they are handwritten parchments worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but most importantly, they are the beating heart of our community. There are also a number of religious items there from the people who use this congregation. Our priority at the Jewish Community Council of Victoria is to get those items out, because with those items, this congregation can continue in another site.
You need to understand that these are active items. These are items that are used several times a day for prayer. And so one of the things is to allow this community to continue immediately. They need access to their prayer items so that they can practice our faith.
Do you know yet how many of those Torah scrolls have been damaged, and when have fire authorities said that you might be able to go in and retrieve any of those very precious items?
So we don't know at this stage. The building is not safe to enter, but our hope is that in time for Shabbat this evening, we can get as many of those items out for the community.
And if they were destroyed, how devastating would that be to the Jewish people?
Judaism lives in our hearts. You know, that's our faith is who we are. Items can always be replaced. It's incredibly important, but we're just grateful that there hasn't been any more serious injuries and more significant loss of life.
Our religion is a religion of debate and discussion. It is a religion that has developed its laws over time by that process of rabbinic debate and discussion. And that starts from the Ten Commandments themselves and spreads outwards through the Torah, which is the first 5 books of what is known as the Old Testament, through to the rabbinic discussions. These documents, these scrolls, these religious items, they are the record of that debate and discussion which informs the very core of our faith. The documents are replaceable in the sense that they are, although handwritten and painstakingly produced, takes over a year to create a Torah scroll, although they are replaceable, there is something that strikes at the very heart of it. That for us, an attack on a synagogue is an attack. It's not an attack on a building. It's an attack upon our faith. It's an attack upon our people. It's an attack upon who we are. The perpetrators of this attack, I'm not expecting them to know the fine detail of Jewish law and tradition, but clearly they wanted to strike at the very heart of who the Jewish people are, and that's what they have done. That's what we are feeling today, and that's the emotional connection to these scrolls and documents and prayer items, even though ultimately, over a long period of time and with a lot of effort and with a lot of cost, they can be replaced.
The President of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry there saying just what has happened overnight, how this has affected him and his community, striking at the heart of the Jewish community there in Melbourne. This synagogue severely damaged, all but destroyed, talking about the Torah, the parchment documents inside that have also been damaged.